even those people that are criticizing Israel. Because to say it's about Zionism or about a genocide is really just not even the whole picture here. So Dasha Nekrasova got fired by Hollywood for hosting an anti-Semitic person that says Jews run Hollywood. Insane. But we all know this is how it goes. We all know this is the way it works. And you have to consider the following. When Trump got elected, there was this feeling that cancel culture was over, right? Am I wrong in saying this? A year ago, I think you could even say it was the consensus that comedy had been legalized and cancel culture is over, and a spirit of liberalization, and by that I mean openness, had come to America. That we'd emerged on the other side of the woke, cancel culture, political correctness, the peak of that, which might have been reached, let's say, arguably in 2022 or 2023. And this had a lot to do with Elon acquiring Twitter and other things. But what we have seen ever since then is that that was really just half the story. Cancel culture did not end. It ended about certain topics. You have license to be cruel to brown people. Am I wrong? That's what that meant. When people said cancel culture was over, it meant that you can say offensive things about black people.
What is this? We need to have an honest conversation about Jewish supremacy, and I don't mean this in a weird Islamist way either. Jewish supremacy is rooted in the belief that anti-Semitism is a unique form of evil that is more morally urgent than other kinds of racism. I'll write something about it in the next week or so. Yeah, I mean, I know where Mohammed El-Kurd is coming from. First and foremost, his family's home was literally stolen in Israel, like very publicly. So just remember that. That could be said about other marginalized groups and forms of oppression too. It's called Oppression Olympics. A lot of people engage in it. No, we're not talking about Oppression Olympics. We're talking about institutional stigma. Right now, as it stands, amongst the Republicans who have run on a campaign of, no holds barred, you can be mean and ruthless to every marginalized group, except for one group. Like, they are the ones who are operating on this wavelength. All bigotry is repugnant, morally abhorrent, and unacceptable. But some bigotries are permissible by the institutions. As a matter of fact, a lot of bigotry is cast aside as marginal or inconsequential or not that important, as opposed to one type of bigotry that still has some kind of institutional stigma associated with it, where you'll get dropped from your agency or whatever, right? Like Amy Schumer can say whatever she wants about Palestinians, Muslims in general, and Melissa Barrera can't even criticize Israel without getting fired. Melissa Barrera didn't even do anything that was anti-Semitic.
Again, about brown people, about Muslims. And our Republican Party and our Republican government and the conservative movement was willing to look the other way. They said, now we're willing to tolerate cruelty and abuse and stereotypes and jokes and offensive things and maybe, a degree of identity politics from white people and against non-whites, the third world, Muslims, barbarians, even about women. J.D. Vance said that it's liberal cat ladies. It's white liberal cat ladies that he hates the most. They're the biggest problem. So they tolerated all this.
It's so funny because, this is the purest expression of Republican politics, reactionary politics. He's a Nazi, right? And Nazi fascism or white Christian nationalism, which is what his version of it is, in the United States of America, is the purest expression, the purest distillation of Republican politics. It's the core, which is why it's so alluring for many. And that is the reason why it's so terrifying for a lot of people in the Republican Party, because they don't want to go to that degree. They don't want to go there. They don't want to take it there. And not because they're fearful that the Republican Party is going to do the Holocaust to Electric Boogaloo or something. They don't want to go there because they don't give a shit about Jews either. Let's be real. The Republicans in power don't give a shit about Jews either. But this actually threatens America's continued allegiance with Israel. It creates too much discontent. And because it's the purest form of reactionary politics, it presents a real threat for institutional power. Because if you were to have someone who actually is genuinely anti-Israel and genuinely anti-Semitic, then all of a sudden, if they were able to win office, then they could change the trajectory of American foreign policy, at least in the way that Americans, in the way that the State Department deals with Israel, in the way that State Department has a seemingly never-ending loyalty to Israel. That's the reason why Republicans are afraid.
Offensive stuff against every other group. But what was happening all the time is that, of course, the
Who was the Nazi that got punched? Was that Fuentes? No, that was Richard
deal
Spencer.
is that you could never criticize the Jews in Israel. So the left can hate on white people, the right can hate on non-white people, but nobody is allowed to say anything about Jews. Nobody is allowed to say anything about Israel. I don't care if you're from the right or left, or you're white or black. We can all agree that that is basically the arrangement. The left hates whites, and the right is very offensive towards non-whites. That's fair to say. I say on the show, I know black people are offended by that, I'm sure. And black people on the left say very offensive things about whites. And we're fighting each other. The right is fighting the left is fighting the right. The whites are asserting identity politics against the non-whites. The non-whites are asserting their grievance politics against the whites. And you know who sits outside all of it? It's this other group. And they will lean in on either side. Stephen Miller will lean in and attack white hippie boomers that suck and Hispanics. And you'll have Jews on the left that'll attack, white people, and Jews on the right will attack black people. But the one group that is totally outside criticism, the one group that is totally outside accountability is Jews. If you talk about the way they're organized, the way they behave, you get fired. You lose your job. And by the way, this is what Ye was talking about a few years ago.
I think it's so insane that when he says criticism, oh, he dropped the hard R. I didn't hear that. One of the things that he's doing here, aside from saying the literal N-word, is that he is trying to make it seem like his racism is actually simple criticism and accountability, where he turns around and makes it seem as though, oh, well, conservative Jews hate black people and liberal Jews hate white people. Everyone gets to hate on everybody except for Jewish people, right? He masquerades or tries to make it seem like pure unfiltered racism and bigotry is actually not an idiotic form of hatred, but instead reasonable criticism. It's ridiculous. Azanabi's not saying it's based in true. He clearly doesn't agree with him. Obviously, I don't. None of this is acceptable. In polite society, none of this should be acceptable. I'm in favor of no bigotry, not all bigotry. If Nick Fuentes is in favor of all bigotry, I'm on the exact opposite of that, where I'm saying none of it is acceptable. But the very fact that the media does have a carve-out almost that they cynically weaponize too. Because it's not just the media getting mad about anti-Semitism. It's also oftentimes the media getting mad at things that aren't even anti-Semitic that they present as anti-Semitism. And the only takeaway for the average American from that conversation is this what we have to worry about all the goddamn time? Like nonstop? Especially considering that at least currently, this might change, and it wasn't the same throughout history, but at least currently, there is no systematic discrimination against Jews in the same way that there is for black people, for example, or brown people. There is discrimination against Jews. Jews are a marginalized population, at least historically, right? And people still do hate crimes against Jewish people. But there is no systemic discrimination against Jews in contemporary American society in the way that it used to exist. Like Jews not being able to go to college, for example, or Jews being systematically discriminated against. That used to exist in this country. In modern society, it does not. And in the absence of that, there is still a tremendous amount of coverage, hyper-focusing on both real anti-Semitic incidents and even things that are not anti-Semitic being presented as anti-Semitism. And that makes most people who aren't Jewish, who have never been around Jewish people, look at the situation and go, why do we care about this? What the hell is going on? And that's exactly how people like Nick Fuentes can present themselves as truth tellers, as people who have identified this inconsistency and are unafraid to say it. If you want to understand how this person has been able to rise to such a degree of prominence, it's primarily because of Israel. And more consequentially, it is the way that organs of the media, the way that they have covered this issue, the way that they have actually defended Israel or contextualized Israel's violence or attacked Israel's critics. David Frum compared you and Zoran to Nick. They're downplaying this Nazi. Exactly. Who is the national Democrat who will speak as honestly and courageously about Mamdani and Piker as Ted Cruz has spoken about Carlson and Fuentes? The disease is worse than the GOP side, but the immune system is weaker on the Democratic side. This is ridiculous. Like, this is incredibly sinister. David Frum is a pro-Israel stooge. He writes for The Atlantic. Editor-in-chief of The Atlantic. He literally is an Israeli concentration camp guard, or was an Israeli concentration camp guard. There are still a lot of people who don't understand. I mean, he's a war criminal himself. David Frum is, right? One of the prominent champions of the Iraq War, right? I think it's crazy that you could easily clip Fuentes here, and it seems like a sentiment most of us agree with. He literally says the end of woke just means a green light for cruelty to brown people. Out of context, it's just him saying this is a good thing. It sounds like him calling out a real societal ill. Exactly, that's the problem. People like David Frum, people who are conservative, but on the liberal side, or, go back and forth, centrist, conservative, liberal, Zionists, unironically lean into this shit. I have a policy of being honest, first and foremost. And this is a dishonest comparison. You are trying to compare me to a Holocaust denier. You are trying to compare me to a person that believes that the organized Jewry is playing a fundamental role in undermining Western civilizational supremacy. These are not things that I believe. These are things that I actually oppose and talk about quite openly.
That suck, and Hispanics, and you'll have Jews on the left that'll attack, white people, and Jews on the right will attack black people. But the one group that is totally outside criticism, the one group that is totally outside accountability is Jews. If you talk about the way they're organized, the way they behave, you get fired. You lose your job. And by the way, this is what Ye was talking about a few years ago. He was talking about it this year. He said, if I make a song about killing black people, it goes triple platinum. If I make a song about being a gangbanger and killing black people, other black people, and abortion and violence, then I'm a triple platinum recording artist. I'm honored at the Grammys. I'm honored at the White House. I'm honored by Rolling Stone magazine and the New York Times. If I make a song called Heil Hitler.
Again, another incredibly idiotic argument. A rapper talking about his own personal experiences growing up, which might include violence, is entirely different than someone highlighting Adolf Hitler, a ruthless Nazi mass murderer. These are all a sequence of false equivalencies that unironically work with the dumbest people in society. It's the same reason why people can always get away with, you can make fun of white people, but if I say something about black people, all of a sudden it's a big problem. Yeah, it is. Because white people, especially in the United States of America or in the Western world, have never been systematically discriminated against on the virtue of their whiteness. They have been discriminated against and ruthlessly brutalized on the virtues of class. Yes, this is true. In any case, let's get back to this guy.
He said, if I make a song about killing black people, it goes triple platinum. If I make a song about being a gangbanger and live on my show on Monday, this coming Monday, and I said, fuck Islam. I said, these Muslims need to go home. They're barbarians. They're third worldists. They like to live in open sewage and bomb crap. You think any conservative would disavow me? Any of them? Any Republican? You think if I was known for saying that, do you think I would have any trouble getting in?
He's talking about Ben Shapiro, by the way. Ben Shapiro has said those things. That was a Ben Shapiro quote.
To CPAC or the New York Young Republican Club Gala or the GOP? Of course not, because Laura Loomer has access to the White House and she says stuff like that. Ben Shapiro has access to Trump and he says stuff like that. Could you imagine? Not to be a boomer here.
This is precisely the contradiction that people like Nick Fuentes will consistently exploit. And that is exactly why he has risen to prominence. Because if your entire political machine revolves around dominating marginalized groups, dominating out groups, built around this association with whiteness as the in-group, but then you still hold a special place and special emphasis for one version of bigotry, then of course people like Nick Fuentes will exploit that over and over again. The worst thing that you can do is allow your enemy to have a correct argument. That is the worst possible thing you can do.
But you imagine if the shoe were on the other foot? It has to be left unsaid. Could I turn around and say F Judaism and those Jews and send them back to Israel? Like, it's literally unthinkable to even say the words. But we all know it's tolerated with Muslims. We all know it's tolerated with blacks. We all know it's tolerated with Hispanics, Asians. And yes, For far too long, it was tolerated against whites and Christians. And that's just the part that got left out. But now that we have this culture of liberalization and political correctness is dead and racial humor is back, everybody's engaging in it. But if you say anything about them, it's a big problem. Even if it's, as we talked about with this idea of a global Jewry, oh, now it's anti-Semitic. Now people are going to lose their jobs again. Here's the point. Cancel culture never ended. Cancel culture was always about this. And I think people even underestimated that.
He loves to play victim. I was banned from CPAC, debanked, and banned on social media sites because I spoke the truth about Islam. He will never admit that, though, because he's a pathological liar. I love Laura Loomer responding to drop site news on here. If you had said any of that about Christians, you would not be allowed back into America. No, that's not true. America's a Christian nation first and foremost, okay? It was built by WASPs. It's a WASP nation. You can absolutely get away with saying shit like that about Christians, just like you can absolutely get away with saying shit like that about white people. But that is a cultural resentment that a lot of people like Nick Fuentes also take advantage of, where they're like, why can you say this about white people? And it is my job to explain to people why there is a difference here, okay? There's a difference between like someone saying something mean while they're engaging in analysis versus someone just being like openly racist against marginalized identities. Fuentes takes Trumpism to its natural conclusion. People like Rufo or Walsh have too much to gain personally in terms of career opportunities or money to truly support tearing down the system. They've tied the market capitalism, which gets in the way. From Groyper's POV, there's no fundamental difference between neoliberalism or neoconservatism. This is not true for the post-COVID right. They are just going to vote Republican forever and ever. No matter who the nominee is, they would vote for Randy Fine. Fuentes might even be more depraved than MAGA, but he's also an intelligent, tactical, sophisticated political actor in a way that his far-right compatriots aren't. It's equal parts refreshing and terrifying to be confronted with a fascist who actually has a brain in his head. I mean, yeah, I think that definitely is a danger. The bar is very, I don't know about refreshing. The words that person is using is ridiculous, but he at least can carry himself like a person who has read a book. And that is, I mean, incredibly low bar to clear, but one that he actually does clear for right-wing politics.